Hey, welcome. Thanks for all the great work this round. Looks like everybody is doing a pretty good job getting most of these ideas down. Common questions, really. Most people had, I think we'll find throughout, the same difficulty, kind of doing the same things, like under the jaw was a difficult thing, finding the brow line. So I think it's good to keep in mind we're all kind of in the same boat. But yeah, the goal will be just to kind of give some feedback as to things that could be improved in a number of these, or just things to work on, because it'll be something that we have to play around with for a while as we develop these drawing skills and get better and better. But I think you'll find after a while that the questions, the common errors will become pretty repetitive and shared by most. So I would say here, these are all well done, nicely put together. So a common thing would be just this jawline. So I mostly chose ones that included some kind of reference so that we could at least see what we're drawing from. And then one thing that was a question commonly was this jaw length. And so remember, the jaw length is only going to be that 1/3 to 2/3 ratio when the head is just straight forward. But when you lean the head back or down, then this area, this distance might diminish. So I think the brow is handled well in these. The connection or elliptical connection drawn through the ball from brow to ear is really nice. So then the only thing I might do on this one is, again, this is maybe a helpful way to think about it, but whatever you have here, if this is your ellipse, so let's just take that little section, you could just take and put that under the chin. So the basic idea for something like this would be that your brow line is this perspective determination for the rest of the head. So what we're trying to set up is a cylinder. So that ellipse could also be your first clue at the brow for what the bottom of the jaw will look like. If you have a hard time seeing this area, think of trying to replicate that ellipse down. And then, you could fill later on, when we get more specific with the jaw, you could fill this in, just kind of bring that up. And then for this area here, some people had difficulty connecting necks, which I get. Again, I'm trying to keep them stretch and pinch. So a neck without a lot of movement would be this, just straight up and down, column-like. So if the head goes up, I'm going to stretch the front, and I'm putting that behind. And then I imagine this connecting to the rib cage, so that's nice. Go around. And then back here, if you kind of imagine where the ball of the head is, I think the line here is nice. So maybe I'm going to tie it there, connect it there. One thing I try to look for the neck when it's in this more dynamic angle is for these lines to be slightly asymmetrical, so that we just don't get too much of a parallel, like this or like this or like this. So that's it, right? So now it just feels a little far. So if we brought it up and then put this down, I think we'd start to encourage that perspective read a little bit more. Same thing could happen here, right? I think that's a good start. So this is our brow. It's replicated here at the jaw. So I give this our underplane. And here maybe we have to do this kind of parallel. So for profiles, I would always try to avoid something too straight. So very least, I would try to exaggerate a direction one way or the other. So maybe I'm under that eyebrow, and then I could be slightly under the jaw. So maybe get like a really narrow ellipse this way. And that's all in an effort to just avoid doing anything that's too flat in there. This one I would push, I would read this as brow dropping to ear. So I would go with that down, and then we're under this chin. This is the right idea. Maybe we could just take, again, this, move it here. And that tells us how much underplane. Sorry, it's a little messy. Then when we get our more specific jaw, all of this would be underneath. And then I think the S is nice. Maybe we could narrow this. So I make the necks a little bit narrower than you would see, because if you ever go on to learn anatomy and put anatomy on the throat, you'd want to build that on top. So you want this to be a little under, and then my connection neck to head is always a T, so an overlap or a wrapping line. So something that goes in and around or behind. This one's nice. That one a lot. These ones I think are really well done and kind of capture a lot of those initial areas that I mentioned as common. We could come in and maybe, this might be premature, but doing these wrapping lines, like where the underplane of this is the canopy of the jaw hits the neck, we could tie that in and kind of wrap it. So it just has, that would be a form intersection. Just anytime two forms hit, I always want to try to bridge them with T overlaps and wrapping lines. I think the neck, the brow line, all of that looks nice. This one, so one thing I would try to do is, this is an example maybe where the tilt is starting to go a different direction with that front plane of the jaw. So that's the only thing that would stand out to me here is I would try to keep, for now, just this generic line of the plane of the face to be more parallel. Sometimes it's hard to recover from bending this line too much because it'll start to kind of bow that plane of the face. And then when I put features on top, it'll start to look like the features are warping too. So that just broadens this underplane. And then we do the same thing, maybe an overlap or a wrap of some kind to kind of connect that in. And then I think I would do this. So the same thing that we talked about with relating the curve of the brow to under the jaw. For a back view, I would just do that for the base of the skull too. Now this, even though I really like the way you're thinking, that starts to feel like a different angle. So let's do this way for that back of the skull, and that matches the ellipse. And then we could wrap our neck in here, right? That's the form intersection. This is really nice. Maybe the brow line needs to get higher though. And then this is a good solution to the underplane of the jaw. Now, see if you can separate that S curve. I like the pinch back here. That's nice. This one looks a little long. I would just be careful with the distance. The jaw is open, so it's going to have a little bit of a distance change, but I would also go maybe with this one. It's always there's some subjective quality to it because when it's on the line, it's really close. It's sometimes just hard to see, hard to gauge, but I would go there. And then here's the drop, maybe just to there. So I'm going from this line to that line, just bringing it up a little bit. Like the neck is nicely foreshortened. We already talked about the back view. I think it's a nicer connection, but let's double check, keeping some of these related. Tilt. Neck connects nicely. Top down looks pretty good. I think that's the best you can probably do, right? What anybody could do there. So good. Yeah, the ones that just kind of stood out to me were some of the areas around that connection and then cleaning up the tilts or relating the early decisions across, matching tilts, matching perspectives, that kind of thing. So some similar views. Sometimes what I'll start to do if I've kind of drawn over one, I'll could have let that one go since you've already seen a drawn solution to it. But let's try this one. So I think all the steps look good. I'm always really encouraged when I see all the steps are there. So everybody's doing the right kind of thing. Sometimes it's just a matter of practice, mileage. Like sometimes if the circle looks wobbly, then it's just practicing circles or something like that. That's usually what most of the issues for me. So there's my tilt. You can use a line to help cite that, but I think you did a nice job. And then the neck goes this way. So we're seeing the neck there. And I could fill that in a little bit more. I think we're seeing more of a stretch. And I don't go like too crazy with stretching, making it like a distorted line. It's just very subtle. And then pinch. So here's an ellipse. The brow, I think you have a nice idea for that. The relationship of brow to ear is pretty high. Here's an ellipse. And then the placement of the jaw makes sense to me. I would also minimize the distance from that 2/3 to 1/3. As the head looks up, it's not far enough where I think we would get the canopy of the jaw under, but it's getting close. So maybe we're there. And then that could be a stopping point, at least for these 4 steps. I don't mind that you have the ears in. I think that looks nice. But the next steps will then kind of make it a little bit clearer as to what went right or wrong at this stage. And then proportioning and shaving these parts down will be a nicer way to creep up on the more specifics. So really good, close. If anything here, maybe the ball relative to the jaw, those proportions feel a little bit dramatic in between. So ball, jaw, neck, the proportions would be the big difference from mine to yours. And let's try this one. So head, tilt, neck kind of goes back a little bit this way, stretch, jaw, looks to be 3/4 to me. So pretty good. Center line here. And then I would trace this down. So that's good. So that's my general perspective angle. I think the only thing that feels off on yours relative is this angle goes a different direction than that angle. So if we think about the head as a box, which I don't usually do at this stage because I find it to be a little too much too soon. But one of my goals early on is to keep my lines related, like I talked about on the prior. So all the tilts are going the same way. Tilt, tilt, tilt. And then my horizontal lines across the face are really just having to agree on that plane or this plane. So this to this is important. And then when we do proportions, those will all be the same because they travel on that same surface. So right now what's throwing me a little bit is just this to that. But that's an easy fix, right? Because just do this. It's hard because he's got the beard, but then we might even see like a little bit of that underplane or something. So fixes here, all looks good. One thing that we already talked about a little bit though is I think for profiles, it's nice to always exaggerate. You don't have to do this, but I tend to like it. So I would go from ear to brow, maybe like, I think slight under, push that neck. So it's here to here. And then I'd build the muscle over that. So almost all of my forms are going to sit on a diagonal. Here's a little bit of that underplane. So that just gives us a little bit more depth to kind of give that early impression of there being a side to a bottom. Center line would be just off the profile, I think. Subtle change, otherwise all the right steps are there. And then for this one, we've seen this one, but give a better appreciation for how to set that up. So tilt, and then insane kind of pinch for the neck here. So S and C, and then try to remember for your connection of neck into rib cage that's always offset. The back of your rib cage is high and the bottom or the pit of your neck is lower. So a nice realistic feel you can get in here is to just give that a diagonal plane top to bottom. And then a view like this, maybe I put my jaw inside the egg. Right, so that's so extreme perhaps that it kind of just comes out just this much. And that's my, instead of just having it be, the 3/4 one, but tilted. So this can, in really extreme views, move up, down. Brow would be up here. So it's like this. Maybe I'll just give that here. So that's just a little mini repetition of that ellipse. And now that I have this plane, we'll again develop that later with steps that are to come, but I can get a transition from the underplane and then get a thinking about where that neck is going to begin and insert. Then I have my pinch back here. So yeah, only thing that maybe would help is just moving that up. Nice. So let's go through a few of these. There, even getting into some side plane cuts and everything here early. So watch the neck. I would try to go for more asymmetry early. I like this line. Maybe that line could get a little bit shorter, pinched, squashed. There's the brow. Nice, you have a nice brow line. And then maybe this here. I think when we get to this the side plane that I'm seeing will probably be a little thinner, just in terms of that whole turn of the head. Here's my center. Anyway, what you could start to do for these, if you're comfortable with these steps so far, is you could try to customize the jaw. Like maybe you shape it to be more feminine or masculine. This one to me just looks like it got a little long. So I would change this one by maybe bringing this up a little bit. So that might be the face, the overall length, and then maybe pull the neck up a bit. So it's the same that I was saying earlier. Everybody's doing this really well. All of this stuff is there and working, and that's the most important thing. And now it's a matter of refining. It's just like working the bugs out for a little bit. But hopefully it's, you're all inspired, or at least and feeling a little bit empowered by having done it well and getting everything up and moving. This one feels like the jaw goes a little bit too far forward. I think I would change the tilt on that here. This is about right. You could now focus more on the intersection of form. How does that canopy relate? So see where some of these lines are left a little bit open. So work more on T's and wraps. I realize that wasn't a big part of this lecture, but for some of you that are getting it down, this would be a good thing to consider. So if I can identify where that ball is, when I attach my neck, I want it to go over or behind. And then when the neck attaches to the rib cage, what is it attaching to? That top plane of the rib cage that's slightly tilted, and then that moves into the rib cage. And that way, when we got a really solid transition, the head, you could even wrap the neck this way. That would be a wrapping line. Just in that, what does that do? That brings us back into the perspective curvature of the head. So this one, I think the issue is the tilt, which is here, isn't matching the face. So those are going two different ways. So I would probably make the tilt of the face go with, or the jaw, with whatever tilt you set up there. So I do this, and then wrap, overlap. So that's the only part that feels a little contradictory in the setup. This is good, all the parts. I think the only thing we would still have to do is find I think there's still a bottom plane. So take that ellipse and move it down, and then the other things I was mentioning earlier. Also really well done here. This would be one where we could focus, or some that we could focus more on the connections. So maybe the neck on this one could be a little more S-curved to help support the lean that way. And then maybe this gets a little shorter so that we feel more of that foreshortening or that pinch back there. And then we could wrap our ellipse this way, because here I'm thinking about the direction the rib cage will be going. So that could go here and go that way. I think that the ellipse looks right. So brow to ear. Now just focus for cleaning these up or pushing them on getting these to line up. So direction. Like same thing here. So this is nice. Now make sure that this is the same. Your chin, whatever it is, you could use a straight or an ellipse. And then that sometimes supports a better read for this underplane. So I almost always, and you could do this or not, but I'm almost always thinking about the perspective direction of the spine for the ellipse of the neck to get the right direction or the perspective. So if we're thinking about the head and the spine and then the neck, the head would be pushed forward by the spine. So my profile understanding of that would be that the spine goes like this and then comes back this way for the rib cage. So if I'm looking at a head in the front, I'm imagining it coming forward at that angle. So that's why for almost all of my front view, I'll push the neck out like this. So that's one reason, and you don't have to do this, it's just what I would do. The other thing would be, so if it's at the back view, I'd be showing it going away, but it just avoids what I know is it's really hard to avoid, but this kind of a feeling of symmetry here. Even though it looks very symmetrical, I usually want to avoid that because it feels stiff to me. So I've done this one. I think it's a pretty good interpretation. This feels better too. I think you could probably push a little bit more, but basic idea is right. This is good, but I think on a number of these, this jaw just feels a little long. That might give you some problems later. So it could be that you're incorporating the beard into that face shape, which is fine. You could do that if you want. I think you could work on those form intersections, and just like really now digging into how the neck is going to attach to the head. So again, that's a wrapping line or an overlap, or both if you can. So this is good. Same thing. So how could we push that connection for the back? And then for my example here on that neck, going back to the spine, I'm thinking of this going forward. Just see if you can, all of you, just avoid doing the neck like that for now. Anything that would just be 2D, see if you can exaggerate it into a different direction. This is fine. I would bring that jaw up a little bit. And then this is could even exaggerate the stretch a little bit more. Here, this feels like it bends a little bit too much. So I would say, I want to keep this pretty. I feel like there's just too much curve for that part of the face. So that's been a common thing I think we've seen in a number of different assignments. This is a better, I like this drawing. I think that's well handled. So I'd say biggest issue would just be watch too much of that bend back. So if this is your tilt for the head, make sure that the jaw is going with that. So you always want to get the tilt to have that parallel movement to the front plane of the face. So that'd be even the case here. So if you think that's your tilt, try to keep the drop of the face parallel to that. Otherwise, you're kind of creating different tilts. That would be tilt, that would be a tilt. Very nice. These are well done. I like the use of the top. You're even getting some of that side plane action in. Good form intersections. I think if you just move this up a little bit, we'll talk about this in the next lecture, but this should be about the bottom of the cranium. Occipital ridge should line up with the bottom of the nose. So that could move your neck a little bit higher. Small issue. This one feels like it could be a little long for me. So I would maybe start to think about moving this up in terms of how you're defining that face shape, leaning back. Good, really well done. Nice assignment. Not too much to complain about here. So this one, I think for brow to ear, I'd be looking this to this. So I think here, the ellipse is just a little unclear for me if it's the dark one. If I should be using the dark or the other line. But I think if we just put something like that in there, that works. We're just kind of slightly underneath, and that already matches the chin you have. Neck's pretty good. Maybe you could add some wrapping lines there just to think about its structure. That's nice. Like nice dynamic tilt from the head to the neck. I would probably keep this a little bit more general before getting to muscles. But that's personal, so it'll be up to you. This brow line feels a little low, so I would go with this one maybe. That feels more central to the head. That one's excellent. Nice side plane. I like that. That's great. Good. This one's tough, right? So I think here what maybe we could have done more with is, like, this feels right on the line. Maybe it could go a little lower, but maybe some kind of underplane could help too. It might help with the idea of the foreshortening. Neck is nice. Try to finish it. A little perspective ring. This would be, I know, difficult because the jaw's opening, but this would be going back to the idea of just matching our early lines. So if this is the front plane, everything's going to want to go across that. And so everything would be the same across here, same across here. So this and then under. It brings us to the neck, and then you could deal with your form intersections there. So really nice assignment. So let's take a look at this one here. So this one I think would be all trying to resolve form intersections with the way that the head, neck, shoulder line tie into one another. This is good. Good tilt. Good shoulder tilt. Now this would be one too, where I agree. I would also try to put the chin up. And then what I normally would try to do that I think you have there too is replicate that brow. So brow to ear gives us a nice perspective. This is good. So you can have that same idea traveling down. And I think the only thing that will help it kind of read is maybe the neck got a little narrow. So broadening it and then letting it read behind the head. So on this side, we could have it stretching, try to get a little bit of that asymmetry and difference between them. And then all of these connect to the highway bone or all the skin on the underside. So I'm usually looking for like this area. And then if you want to get more specific, if it helps to see or understand this a little bit more, chin to jaw, all kind of come down to that point. Sometimes, especially for these front views, this could be helpful just to see a little bit more concretely. So that becomes the underplane. But the thing that's working against me here is that this feels like a back view because the neck's plugging in this way. Something like this would be tilt. That chin's going to be much higher here, I think. The brow line might be really just kind of in line with the circle. This becomes the underplane that we drew above. Massive stretch. And this side feels much more pinched to me. That'd be my front plane, chin, underside of the jaw, and then connecting the neck inside. This would be my setup at least, and then I have to build the context to rein it in. Good, but again, so let's think now about connecting the forms. So this could be the skull, pinching the neck this way perhaps, stretching the neck that way, and then building the connection. So that would be a good thing for you to start to look for, is just now connections. You're doing the pieces right, but now maybe the goal is to tether them a bit more. So overlap, diagonal, S-curve, wrap, overlap, diagonal, C-curve, and then behind, neck goes away. I can clean up the jaw and make it look like her face later. I'm not worried about it right now. And then we'd be onto the rib cage. So if it helps, you can add the rib cage for context. It's not important, but like this would be the back, this would be the spine. It definitely helps if you get stuck or you're working on these connection areas. I think we've seen this one handled in a few others nicely. So it's just setting up your perspective, tilt. If you're ever confused about the jaw, just make it the same line as your perspective. If you can't find one, solve the other, and then bring it back or bring it down. And then I think the neck goes a little bit this way, a little bit of pinch, a little bit of stretch, kind of gives them that suspicious look or sneaky look. Will not be it. So all the right stuff, just need a little bit more movement there. These turned out nice as well. So noticing it's a nice alignment between the tilt and then the tilt here. This one, I think maybe we could have pushed this a little bit more under so I'm looking for the peak to the brow and then down to the ear. And then that might have given us, maybe we could use a little bit of a side plane. Otherwise good. Now also start to work on those form intersections. How do we bridge the neck and relate that as a form? by overlapping or wrapping it to the head or jaw. This one I think maybe is a little bit in from profile. So there's our perspective. Maybe I could swing that a little bit farther. Nice tilt, nice basic egg or head shape. Here's the drop. Center line. And then that gives me underplane. And then I think more of a, this feels like a stretch to me. So I might push the S. Feels like it's longer because it's raising, then a pinch. And then you have a nice ellipse here for the top of that rib cage. So one thing here maybe to be careful with is, I think the head to the jaw size feels a little too dramatic, too big to too small. So the perspective feels good, something like that. Tilt is fine, neck is angled. Now early on, even if it is, a little foreshortened, I try to keep it more average. And that's just so I can cut or refine it later. So we want to move this with the tilt. So it's not a dramatic difference, but I think something like that could taper too much and then be hard to work on later, would be my only concern. Yeah, so we looked at this one, that's good. I think maybe just thinning your neck in from there, bringing that line in. That might be hard to build on. That's the only thing I'm thinking about for the proportion at this stage is I don't want something to be too big. I'd rather have it be underbuilt so that I could build muscle or form over later. This one feels again like that discrepancy in proportion between jaw and head. So maybe, I think if we brought the head width in here to more of that ball, we'd probably be fine. Like that, I think that would be a comfortable shape to start to build on, and it feels more proportionate to the jaws. So it's one of those two things, right? That when I'm laying in my egg, I make my jaw too short or my head too big. So the reason I like this setup is I can kind of go back and really because I do it all the time. I'm not different than any of you. So it's just easier for me to correct at this stage by tweaking one or the other. That one's pretty good here. So we would see center line, underplane, pinch, stretch. But double check this size. This one maybe got a little too contour oriented. That looks like you're looking for the cheek or something there, which I totally get. But we just don't want to lose the relationship between the tilts for now. I like this line, that's nice. Maybe more exaggeration here. That stretch. This one looks like maybe you're aiming for more of the egg shape, which is fine. Profile. Slightly under. So maybe we have to bring that. Could we bring that here too, is what I try to include. Can I give a slight underplane for the jaw on this one? Double check that neck. This is another jaw one for me. This one, I think the jaw should be a little bit lower. And then this is on the line for me. I might want to go with above for that one. But really, I think you go with either. I think I would see that. Reproduce it here. Bring this down. But if you went slightly under too, I don't think it'd be an issue. We've done a lot of under, but went with the opposite. Yeah, good so far. So like I said before, all of the steps are here. I think it's just a matter of mileage. If we take number 5, number 7's good. Number 5 would be about, and the way that we've set this up, and why this looks a little bit, let's say a little flatter in some areas, is getting the plane of the brow to match the chin and then connecting form. So this is a repetition of that same perspective on the face. We have that. And so now the challenge is, how do I get it to tie into the neck? So this is good. You're thinking the right way with the stretch and the pinch. So even if you want to see that as an isolated stage, that's fine. But the way that I'm going to tie form is to intersect. So here it could go around which just means I pick up on the same curvature, surface curve as the rest. And then if I can, a little overlap. So this wraps, this overlaps. A wrap, and then T. And then I like to go with the opposite angle for the ellipse and this view of the neck. So drop that down. This comes up, and then that could go overlap or maybe wrap across. But something to make those forms feel like they wedge or join together is all I think you're missing. Right now, the difference is this feels more outlined. And that sometimes that outline can insist on it being a shape, no matter how much inside work. So anytime two forms intersect, like you did a really nice job here, that separates their space, or even like this. So for some of these down here, though, I would do on this one, push this. That way you get that step back or that plane change, and then you could be onto your neck. This one, I think, is part of that issue we've been talking about a little bit, where there's a proportional issue from the head size to the chin, and then the neck feels too small. But I would say in this one, the biggest issue for me is your center line, the wrapping line for the head, it's too high. So now if I do what you did nicely here, this major axis through, so you notice how that is above the center of the whole sphere. So that's starting to lift your brow line up. So ideally, if we were to kind of do that same sphere and ellipse over here, I just try to get it more to be centered, or that major axis sitting at the center. So this line would then want to be half of the height for the overall there. What the issue will be is later it's going to skew the features too high. So it's going to stretch this distance out because your brow is going to be here, and we're going to gauge proportion of features from brow to chin. So it could be your sphere size, it could be where you're setting your ellipse, but double check those two. Just make sure you bring them more into alignment there. Okay, so this was same kind of question, thinking about that brow to ear relationship. Yeah, so this one it's brow to top of ear. So the only part that confuses me is why you're swinging the line that way, because what I'm looking for is across to top of ear. So this way. And that's why on mine, I went with this line, because that arc is aiming from either brow ridge or eyebrow. It doesn't really matter. I mean, it's not going to move too much to top of ear. So again, it's unclear to me why you would be arcing it that way. So that this would be more if I were above. So I would see that one like, if the brow was low and then the ear was high. And these, so my ellipse again is as I'm reading this to that. So that would read as a perspective that's underneath. So if I'm going to do the lay-in of this one, I would create it like this. Brow, top of ear. You don't have to draw the ear, by the way, but that's just where I'm thinking. And then here would be the rest of it. This one's good, pretty close to the to straight, but I'd say it's still slightly under. I go up, end of the brow, temple, and then a slight arc down to hit that top of ear, which you have. That's really nice. So the only thing there is what we just discussed on the last one, which is now that you have that all set up and nicely done, make sure that the through line of your ellipse, the major axis, is at the halfway point on your fall. See how that is lower now? And do you see how, as a result of this being lower than half, that it feels like there's a lot of extra head up top? So the way I would fix that is just, you could start with a straight if you want. Start with a halfway on your ball, and then make sure that whatever you make or you decide for an ellipse, that you always keep it symmetrical to that line, right? That might be the easiest way to go about it. So if you feel like this is a reoccurring issue, just always begin with the half, that, and then put your ellipse over. And then I could drop down into my, the rest of the head. So again, a couple drawings that we've looked at already, but You can also show all the steps that are important being used and used well. So it's just a matter of refining mileage. So here's my head, here's my tilt, here's my jaw shape, here's my chin, stretch, pinch, try to show a little less so we get that neck to foreshorten behind the head. Brow, I think you have a good idea of the brow. Just to reinforce the last critique, for anybody struggling with where to place that ellipse, start with your half line. Do your ellipse around it. That way you're guaranteed that it's not going to shift up and down. And then sometimes I'll just come back in and use line weight to darken where I want the ellipse to read. And then, so some subtle things here, like make sure the tilt is matching the front of the face. Those are a little bit off. Make sure that the brow matches the chin. Those are a little bit off. So just over time, those become enough to kind of throw the look of the drawing. So there's my center, trying to get my center to match my tilt. So bringing those back into alignment, and then I'd be good. I think those are the same things that are at issue here. Now let's start with that center. Draw the ellipse using that as the major axis, so it has to be symmetrical to it. I think we're above this. You do the same. And then when I drop, so the next thing will be when I drop my center line, don't curve that, because then that's going to curve the whole front of the face. I want the front of the face to be a rigid, kind of flat, even area, so I can build features out or in. So I think for this one, I would leave there. So I think these are all nicely done as well. And consistently, I think all the ones we've been seeing so far are in the same boat. All of the elements that we've discussed in the first 4 steps are really clear, well used. And now it's a matter of just getting a little bit tighter with difficult poses, maybe that undershot or something like that. Consistently too is the difficulty of building these intersections. So let's, I think this has everything almost perfect, and then just needs a little bit more decision making around those overlaps and wraps. So let's say here's my brow. It's really high, probably near the contour of that sphere. And then I could take that and just kind of do a bottom of a cylinder here if you want. Just repeat that ellipse down so that this is the same there. Here's where I would say that cuts, and that's going to put that right up against the throat. So we'll say that's done for now. And then on the back, you have a really nice C curve here. Really nice S curve that shows the stretch of this, like the front of the neck. And now it's how do we integrate them? So it could be that, we bring this around and put it behind. This wasn't, a big part of our first 4 steps because we're just getting these things up and going, but it's going to be something that we'll talk about more and something that can help you as you revisit these. And then maybe I always want to find an intersection. So it's a line that can communicate the transition from one form to the next. Whereas here it's a little vague, right? They even a little bit like that, but maybe we could just darken it for there. On the other side, for the C curve, instead of having it go maybe like kind of more on the outside, let's bring it in and then start to participate that line with the surface. So that becomes another wrap. And slowly everything will be kind of in front, behind, but as it comes inside or around, all of the lines are going to start to slowly build an awareness of that big picture form. Maybe we haven't done too many of these. So there's my head, really dramatic tilt that comes forward to mimic that jaw or parallel the jaw to that. Barely see any neck, give a nice little overlapping shape for that. Maybe I'll imagine the chin is down here and then my brow, probably even lower. And that would come to almost a full circle when I bring that around. Neck, there. And then maybe here I'll hide it. So I'll do like the neck stretching, sweep that under the jaw and do an overlap there. So it feels like it's really pushed or tucked under the head. And then nice kind of trap shape. And then this side of the head, I clean up that shape, but that's really well done for that. This one I think might be turned away a little bit more. So I'm starting to get a little bit more of a profile look from yours. So on this one, maybe we do like, here's the plane of the face, but let's try to draw through a little bit more. Maybe I see some of the jaw here overlapping. It's almost like that back that we were talking about, the back view. And then if her hair were a little lighter in that area, we might see the base of the skull here. And so that's where I'm going to start to get my stretch for the neck. Brow on this, I think would be, I would go something like that. I think maybe top of ear to brow. I don't know, it could be wrong, but that's where I'm leaning for that one. Yeah, overall, I think these are all really well done. Just a few things here and there. Probably moving forward, focus more on those form intersections. Okay, so we spent some time looking at these ones today. So hopefully you have an idea, just kind of without me having to go too much into these, what the solution would be for the view itself. For the drawings, I think the most important thing would be, again, you have all the right steps. There's nothing wrong with the steps. Maybe I always like to push a tilt off of a vertical. So my head, shoulder, neck, and this is good. So your kind of jaw comes off. This one, I would probably try to show more of that underplane for the jaw, just like we did in the prior assignment. So that you get that. And then the connection. So very much like the themes I was talking about for the last one, getting this neck to feel like it plugs into the back of that skull would be a great thing to shoot for here. So pushing that cylinder into the sphere, trying to get that to connect. And then here would be my C. Maybe my S is over here. It just makes the three major parts, the cylinder of the neck, the sphere for the head, and then the boxy area for the jaw, feel like they live together a bit more. Where now I see them all really well done, but they feel more separate. So that would be my change. This one we've drawn a number of times. I think it's definitely a difficult one for people. So this one we were trying to take, again, the idea would be take that, put it here. You can raise that chin up even more if you want, but that now gives you what is consistent to the whole, that perspective. So even if you can't find this, don't worry, just take your perspective theme, bring it down, and then form intersection, overlap, wrap is what I mean. So tie that to the volume. Tie this, that could go behind, it could go in, it could go there, and then this way. So really close, right? I think all I did was just push lines closer together. This one has a lot of good going on. I think it would help to just get that neck to read. If you want, we could extend that a little bit, lower the jaw to set us up for an open mouth. You don't have to do it. And then this is really, that's a pretty foreshortened. So maybe I'll just do a little C here for that pinch. And then under the jaw, I could see that. So that's my stretch. I think that's going kind of almost directly back. And then the shoulder goes from down here to up here. Okay, not bad. Let's look at a couple. So we have up and down. So right idea for sure for this one. Head, tilt. Jaw's going to go with that tilt, parallel. Chin. I think chin is in my egg here, or in my ball there. Whatever form you're setting it up with. The perspective is really high. So I think we're underneath her head at that degree. So if I want, I could take this, kind of mimic it down here. It's the same thing, cut this so that you get a plane that you could push up against the neck. Then big stretch. Back here is our pinch. So everybody keep in mind, form intersections or these connections are probably one of the most challenging aspects for people. Everybody does have a nice sense of the workflow, the 4 steps, but common mistakes are sometimes the proportional discrepancy between the head and the jaw, or the jaw getting too sharp, or the neck getting too stiff, right? So everybody's kind of working with the same issues. So seeing it hopefully in others is helps reinforce maybe what you're also currently working on. So here's a 3/4 down. Brow line goes this way. Here's the top center line. And then stretch and pinch. So stretch in the back, pinch in the front. Right. And so maybe we'll have this as our last one. Again, this is what I was saying prior about how I think everything is there. Everybody's doing really well with getting the steps, the order, the workflow. When you're looking at your own, think about the steps, head, tilt, 3/4, and double check. Like when I look at this, when you look at this, great setup. All the stuff is right. But now I'm noticing, this sphere feels bigger. Why is that? Oh, well, I know how to double check that, because if I just look at the relationship of the ellipse to the ball, that's a little low. So if you have that issue, what was our suggestion? Put a halfway in there, find a straight that just cuts your ball in half, and then always build your ellipse from that, right? So in this one, it would probably need to come up here. And then what does that do? Well, that immediately changes the proportion of the wraps, because now that's going to bring the jaw up. And now we're going to get a kind of a different proportion between those areas. So that's something to keep in mind for all of us. It's not just you guys. It happens to me. Maybe just on this one, good, really nice gestural indication for your neck. Just shorten it a bit. I always tell people to make their gesture lines longer. So I think something there is good. Working a little bit longer with a line helps us to get that gestural movement. But now I got a little long. So you could start with that longer curve if it helps, and then just cut into it. So this one, maybe double check that ellipse, but also we've talked today about making sure that your tilt matches the front of the face. All right, so those are close, but they're starting to slide a little bit. As you see, they're starting to converge a little bit. So I think that would help. Maybe even losing some of that jaw. Letting some of that jaw in this distance here foreshorten might contribute to the feeling of this pose. I get that jaw to feel like it's tucking back behind a little bit more. This one could just be that the neck proportionally feels a little off. And so the head to the jaw might be fine, but maybe we need a different proportion in that neck. Maybe it's a little too thin. I think that's probably what I would imagine is going on there. So all the things, like I use these steps to double check. This tilt is separate from this. So that it might help us to get that more back on track for a pose like this. This to that. And maybe the tilt isn't so radical left to right. Maybe it's like leaning more towards. So you see me use these in this session, like drawing arrows to show that to and from. So everybody, you did really nice that submitted work. I think everybody's heads are in a great place. It is worth taking the time to study in this area, clean it up. You don't have to live here for the rest of your life, but usually most of the issues as we build stuff on top comes back to these early stages, right? If something's missized or there's like a kind of a warped front plane for the face, the features never kind of sit right. But I think all of our solves are pretty easy, and everybody's work is refining a thing, cleaning up a thing, but for the most part, they're all really well done. Just double check proportions, matching tilts, and then tying forms together with wraps and overlaps. But nice work.